Sheldon Keefe is still the head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But for how much longer is the clock ticking on him? To discuss that, let's bring in our hockey insider, Darren Dreger. Dregs, we heard from Sheldon Keefe and the players 2 days ago. Keefe admits he's fallen short of expectations. He takes responsibility for that, but he would desperately love another shot with his team because he feels they're really, really close to taking the next step. We know we're going to hear from Toronto Maple Leafs upper management on Friday. What's your expectation on the timeline on Sheldon Keefe, on some kind of an announcement, some kind of idea of what's going to happen with him?
Yeah, I believe that Sheldon Keefe, and we will know what his future is with the Toronto Maple Leafs in advance of Friday's media availability involving General Manager Brad Treliving, Brendan Shanahan, and the head of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, Keith Pelley. And look, at this stage midweek, Gino, I think that Sheldon Keefe, who is the current head coach of the Maple Leafs, also has a pretty good feel for what direction this is headed. I mean, we're a number of days removed from the Maple Leafs losing Game 7 to the Boston Bruins on Saturday night, and yet here we are with management continuing to deliberate the future of Sheldon Keefe. So again, given my experience in this chair, it seems more likely that the Toronto Maple Leafs will make a coaching change, but it's more based on the history of failure with the Toronto Maple Leafs with Sheldon Keefe as head coach than it does with how hard he coached and the adversity that he overcame this year with the new general manager peering over his shoulder. So if the Maple Leafs make change, I'm pretty sure they will, then I think that has more to do with the fact that Sheldon Keefe has been involved in disappointment for as long as he has in Toronto.
His numbers during the regular season have been outstanding, but his numbers in the playoffs have been amongst the worst in NHL history from a winning percentage standpoint. So we can understand that. Now, if you're going to move on from Sheldon Keefe, you got to have some idea of other options that are out there. A name that keeps popping up that we've heard so far is Craig Berube. Here's a guy who led the St. Louis Blues to the Stanley Cup in 2019. He was fired by the Blues back in December. He is available. Is he a serious candidate if the Toronto Maple Leafs decide to move on from Sheldon Keefe?
Yeah, without question, he is a top candidate if the Toronto Maple Leafs make the coaching change. And, you know, he's a hot commodity around the National Hockey League, Gino, as we know, as has been reported. Craig Berube did interview for the position of head coach of the Ottawa Senators, and I know we're going to talk about that in just a second, but you know they've unveiled Travis Green now as their new head coach. We know that the New Jersey Devils have interviewed Craig Berube, so Tom Fitzgerald and the New Jersey Devils continue to look for Travis Green's replacement. They're also looking for experience and go down the list. I know that Craig Berube just wants to get back in the National Hockey League as a head coach, and the pedigree of Berube, man, that ticks a lot of boxes for all the teams that I've just mentioned, including the Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs, if they make the change, are going to need some level of experience. So if it's not Craig Berube, then you look at Todd McLellan, whose name has been out there for a while. You know, what about Gerard Gallant, who's been on the sidelines? Again, you're talking about experienced NHL head coaches, and I think that that's a very attractive asset as Brad Treliving continues to go through, you know, his deliberation on what to do with the head coaching position of the Maple Leafs.
Let's get back to the Ottawa Senators. You've been telling us for days now that the Sens were going to hire Travis Green as their head coach. They finally made it official. How did that whole process unfold, and how is he the right guy for that organization at this point?
Yeah, just given his history as a coach, not just a coach in the National Hockey League, as we just touched on. You know what, Gino, I was a bit surprised that the New Jersey Devils didn't rip the interim tag off Travis Green and keep him in New Jersey. But obviously they've got something else in mind. Maybe it's Craig Berube. Maybe it's somebody else. We're going to find out as they go through their process. But then beyond that, I know that the Ottawa Senators certainly interviewed Berube. They talked to Todd McLellan. Steve Staios did his due diligence, and he talked to other candidates to a point where they were verbally talking about what a deal might look like, the structure of a deal, the term, the money, and all of those things. And that includes Travis Green. They like the fact that Travis Green has coached young teams. You go back to his days with the Vancouver Canucks as he made his way up through that organization from the American League to the National Hockey League. The fact that he's been through some tough situations at the NHL level. He goes back becomes an assistant and then is promoted to the head coaching role in replacing Lindy Ruff in New Jersey. So there's a lot to like about Travis Green, but what they like most about him, Gino, is I think the fact that they feel like there's still some growth available there. When I think of Craig Berube, or I think of Todd McClellan, or even Gerard Gallant for that matter, I think of those guys in baseball terms as closers. And there's still some growing pains ahead for this roster in Ottawa. There's some things that they've got to learn. There's some changes to the personnel in that lineup that are likely going to happen in this offseason. So maybe they've got to get through some stuff before they bring in the closer. And Travis Green is the right coach, at least I believe he is, to help them get through that process and continue to develop.
Dregs, before I let you go, I got to ask you about a buddy of ours. We've been close to him for decades, literally. Rick Bowness, 38 years behind numerous different NHL benches, no less than 8 different teams. He's finally said a tearful goodbye to say he's heading into retirement. Give me your thoughts on him in general and where the Winnipeg Jets go from here.
Well, aside from being heat of the moment and being an emotional coach when it was appropriate to be an emotional coach on the bench and otherwise, Gino wasn't very often away from the bench or the rink where Rick Bowness didn't have a smile on his face and always had his priorities intact. And for Bones, priority one, family, and making sure the well-being of his family is first and foremost, and that's never going to change. And then number 2 is doing whatever he could do to get the best out of his individual players, again, on and off the ice. He spoke of this, and he did it very emotionally, talking about, yeah, it was great when you could encourage and develop a player to be better developmentally, but getting to know that player on a personal level and appreciating and understanding what makes that young man a man and everything that goes into his world, that was equally important to Rick Bowness. So he's a tough act to follow. He did so many great things in Winnipeg and helping get through some of the stuff they had muddling around in their dressing room, developing a culture and identity, a structure, all of those things. Look, I think that Scott Arniel has an excellent chance of becoming the next head coach of the Winnipeg Jets. I know Kevin Cheveldayoff wants to go through his process and will likely reach out to a number of candidates as well. But whomever is hired, or in this case, if Arniel is promoted, that's a tough act to follow, both on and off the ice. Rick Bowness, one of the best.
One of the best. We're going to miss him. But Dregs, I just get a sense that he's going to keep popping up. Maybe never behind an NHL bench again, but maybe somewhere in management or as a consultant. I think he just loves the game too much to be completely apart from us. We certainly wish him all the best. Hockey Insider, Darren Dreger.